I think sometimes we have certain types of experiences that are far more common than most of us realize. Today, I want to talk about one such type of experience. Now, I have a rather ambitious video series lined up, and I have until recently been feeling very stuck in moving forward in any meaningful way. Part of the problem is that the series is a divergence from what I was doing with this channel, and I felt a need to explain the reason for the shift. And being a teacher, a preacher, an activist, I felt that explanation should be in the form of this is what I'm talking about, and this is why I think you should care about it. Part of the problem with that approach is that I'm going to be talking about a great many subjects, which I will attempt to bring together. And among the first things I'm going to be talking about is the Christian Bible. And if I started talking about why should you care about the Bible? I felt like it would come across as proselytizing and evangelizing, and that's not quite what I'm trying to do here. So instead of explaining why I think you should listen, I'm going to try to talk a bit about why I'm talking about this subject. That phenomenon I mentioned, that I think is far more universal, is something I want to call strange threads or strange connections. What do I mean by strange connections or strange threads? So, I'm a nerd. I've described myself as a recovering academic, as a hacker in the classical sense of the term. By that, I mean I avoid warranties. I'm someone who gets curious about how things work, and I will sometimes open things up and tinker with them. And I like when people find creative and unconventional solutions to problems. One of the things I love about computer science is the willingness to innovate and develop new and exciting platforms and new ways of organizing, accessing, relating to, and interacting with information. Because human beings are naturally curious creatures. And as naturally curious creatures, we are experts at pattern recognition. We are so good at pattern recognition that oftentimes we pick up on things before we consciously recognize our situation. Sometimes you can enter a room and feel the tension of the people there before you consciously register any cues from others. Sometimes, without any conscience or logical antecedent, we might have a thought or a whisper or an impulse to explore a certain subject, to pick up a certain book, to go to a certain event, and that impulse will grasp us. Sometimes we may ignore that impulse, and we might not think it's anything important, and we just go on with our lives as usual. And sometimes I think we pay for that decision. So I was raised Catholic, and that instilled in me an appreciation for good education and academic rigor. I joined the United Church of Christ, a Christian denomination that values modernity, science, and an educated clergy. I would say we believe that God gave us brains for a reason and we should use them. And I went to seminary because I was a good teacher and because I wanted to apply my teaching, preaching, and public speaking abilities to offer comfort, hope, and something of substance to those who are in need. In that sense, my decision to go to seminary and to pursue ministry was an extension of my call to teach. And I also wanted to be the sort of minister I wish I had growing up, which I think sometimes happens to queer people who are raised in conservative Christian environments. So to some, that decision to go to seminary probably seemed like a dramatic shift. I was a logical left brain computer nerd who was probably on the spectrum and became a professor because school was a comfortable environment for me to work in. And I'm also a queer person with a background in philosophy and theater who became radicalized as an undergraduate student and who wanted to help transform the world for the better. I was also a vegan animal rights activist who was sometimes insufferably annoying about it. We human beings are complicated creatures. One thing many years of being a queer, radical leftist animal rights activist has taught me, and one thing that I've had to learn over and over again in my life, is that one cannot be compelled or guilt tripped into caring about something. If that were true, I would never have left the Catholic Church. So I came out of a tradition that valued education, and I went into a tradition that valued education. And the Bible scholars in those traditions use good academic scholarship and the historical critical method and value context because they are concerned with truth and with a faithful representation of authorial intent and meaning, and how all of this informs our understanding of our faith traditions. I've also studied and resonated with not just the Christian Bible, and not just also non-canonical texts, some which were discovered at Nag Hammadi in 1945, some which were preserved through the years but just didn't end up in the Bible, and also texts from other faith traditions like the Bhagavad Gita, like Buddha Sutras, like the Tao Te Ching, and of course the classic Joseph Campbell and the Power of Myth. And I loved how all these different perspectives appeared to point towards the same truth, even as they had their diverse representations and sometimes seemed to come to irreconcilable conclusions. And so when I felt compelled to pick up the Amplified Bible, something was there. But this was not considered by respected biblical scholars at Catholic or mainline Protestant seminaries as good scholarship. And yet, something about Frances Seawort's story resonated with me, and something about her work resonated with me. And I'll talk more about that in my next video. But it felt like something I had to explain away. I couldn't use that Bible in my seminary studies, so I had to get the Oxford Annotated Bible. When I moved, I had to cull a number of my books, and at some point I had to let go of my Amplified Bible. Fast forward to a few years ago, I felt the impulse to pick up a copy again. I wanted a physical copy because I wanted to reconnect with and explore whatever it was that had first drawn me to the text. I didn't know why I wanted it, but I followed that impulse. And I opened it after years of not looking at it, and something felt off. It was not the same book. I thought at first it might have even been a mandala effect, but it wasn't. It sent me down a rabbit hole, and I'll talk more about what that was in the next video. But I think we encounter these pulls from time to time, this impulse to pick up a book that we feel we shouldn't be drawn to because of how we perceive ourselves or even how we wish to be perceived by others. So these are not just guilty pleasures or some strange temptation to indulge in something bad, but impulses that have no logical foundation. You feel the urge to take another route home from work, and you discover a new restaurant you would not have that you would have missed otherwise. You decide to go out for lunch and you run into an old friend. Things like that happen all the time when we become curious and open to exploring. And I think more often than not, we've trained ourselves to ignore those impulses. We tell ourselves that we have 20 minutes to eat lunch, and we uh, got to get caught up on our reports so we can finish work on time. But it's a beautiful day, and there's a park, and sometimes that fresh air and distraction is exactly what we need to think differently about a problem that has been weighing us down. So, in this series, I'm going to be talking about scripture and religion, and I'm going to be talking about computer science, society, philosophy, games, information theory, and education. And I'll be bringing all of this together towards the work I'm doing now. And what I hope you'll get out of this is not just some interesting meandering journey through my mind, not just something I hope you understand me and understand what I'm doing, although it would be nice. I hope that what I offer you is useful information that helps you engage with life with a sense of whimsy and curiosity. I hope there's something interesting and useful for you. And it's my goal with each video in this series to offer something practical. So, my practical bit for today is give yourself permission to follow those strange connections, even if you don't think people will understand. You don't need permission to learn something new or to try something new. Just notice what captures your attention and notice what you're drawn to explore. Get curious. Reconnect with that childlike wonder and ask the questions about what you're noticing. Because every situation, whatever you're going through, whatever you're experiencing, whatever you're seeing in the world outside of you, every situation can be transformed when we approach it with a fresh perspective. And sometimes we just need to give ourselves permission to change our mind. So, in the next video, I'm going to talk about the Amplified Bible and I'm going to talk about object oriented programming. What's the connection there? Well, you'll have to wait and see. Hope to see you in the next video. Be well, and I will be recording videos regularly from here on out.